Today we're stitching up the ultimate going out top. Flirty, fun, full of attitude, and free. This blouse from Unfettered Patterns features dramatic puffed sleeves, a plunging neckline, a front tie, and a cropped length that strikes the perfect balance between bold and elegant. Whether you're pairing it with high-waisted jeans or layering it over a dress, this piece is a true showstopper. I'm sewing mine in a gorgeous cranberry crepe back satin from mytextilefabric.com. One side has a beautiful satin sheen while the other is matte, so you get the silky look without the slippery sewing struggle. Now, if the open front isn't quite your style, don't worry, I've got you covered. I made a matching camisole to wear underneath using the free Mackenzie top pattern from Mood Sewciety. It's also in the same satin and has adjustable straps, so you can style it high or low as you'd like. And yes, I've got a full sew along for that camisole, which I'll link for you in the description below. Let's get started on this head-turning top. Here is my back bodice piece, and I'm going to finish the raw edges of the shoulder seams. And I'll also finish the shoulder raw edges for the front bodice pieces. Then I'll place the front and back bodice pieces right sides together along the shoulders and pin in place. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Apply interfacing to the wrong side of each of your facing pieces, then place them right sides together along the shoulder seams and pin in place. Sew both shoulders at a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Finish the outer raw edges of your facing in your preferred method. Place the facing and the neckline of the bodice right sides together, aligning the shoulder seams and pin in place. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Clip into the curves of the neckline within the seam allowance, careful not to clip through your stitching line. Then we're going to understitch the facing, flipping the facing over its seam allowance and sewing the facing to the seam allowance all the way around with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we'll turn the understitched facing to the inside of the garment along the main seam. Give your neckline seam a good press. Here is the inside of my bodice with that facing pressed along its main seam. I'm going to edge stitch along the finishing stitches to secure the facing to the bodice all the way around. To prepare the sleeve to be gathered and inserted into the armhole, we're going to sew basting stitches from one outer notch all the way across the sleeve cap to the opposite outer notch. Make sure to leave thread tails on both ends so you have threads to pull for gathering. Place the sleeve and its corresponding arm side right sides together. Align the notch at the top of the sleeve with the shoulder seams, and also align the other notches and pin in place. Now that I've pinned those 3 points, I'm going to continue pinning from the outer points to the bottom of the armhole. Then I'll pull my gathering stitches to fit the center of the sleeve in place and pin. Sew the sleeve in place from one side across the top of the sleeve to the other side with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then finish the raw edges together. Here is the bottom of my sleeve, and I've gone ahead and finished the raw edges from one side to the other. I'm going to fold my finished edge to the wrong side by 1/2 inch and give that a good press. This will be enough for the casing for my 3/8 inch wide elastic. Now that bottom edge is pressed up to the wrong side, I'm going to edge stitch along the edges of my finishing stitches from one side to the other to form a casing. I'll attach a safety pin to one short end of the elastic and begin lacing it through the open short edge. Once my elastic is pulled through enough that the short end of the elastic meets the raw edge of the sleeve, I'll baste in place to secure. Then continue pulling the elastic to the opposite side and we'll baste that edge in place as well. Now we'll place the sleeve and its corresponding side seam right sides together and pin. Sew the underarm and the side seam with a 3/8 inch seam allowance in one continuous set of stitches. Then finish those raw edges together. Repeat to form and attach both sleeves. I'm going to open out the bodice once again, and I'm going to sew basting stitches along the bottom edge of the bodice from one inner edge of the facing straight across to the opposite inner edge of the facing. Remember to leave tails of thread for gathering. Then we can pull the basting stitches to gather the bottom of the bodice, then we'll set this piece aside. Place the waistband and tie pieces right sides together and pin the short edge. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seam open. Then we'll fold this piece right sides together, and I'll pin from the outermost notch to the edge of the tie. Leaving this gap in the middle, we'll repeat the pinning on the opposite side. We'll sew from the outermost notch, backstitching to secure with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, pivoting to sew to the bottom end of the tie. Repeat on both sides. Trim the bottom edges of the tie. Then turn both sides of the tie right side out. Now at both of the notches, I'm going to snip into the seam allowance by 3/8 of an inch. Snipping to the stitching line and not beyond. Give both sides of the tie a good press. Place the tie and the bottom of the bodice right sides together. The released seam allowance of the tie that we snipped into will be placed at the finished edge of the bodice, and we're going to pin together through one layer of the tie. The other notches on the tie will align with the side seams, pin in place. And repeat to pin the opposite released seam allowance of the tie at the opposite edge of the bodice. Distribute the gathers evenly and pin in place. Then we'll sew that single layer of the tie straight across from notch to the bottom of the bodice. Fold and press the opposite raw edge of your tie waistband piece to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch. Then we're going to fold the waistband in half so that the folded edge that we just pressed just covers the seam line. Pin in place all the way across. Now that I have my waistband pinned from the outside, placing the pins inside that waistband seam and making sure that the pins catch that inner folded edge of the waistband. Then we can stitch in the ditch in the waistband seam from one side of the bodice to the other. And now your blouse is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.